Ding, ding. Welcome back to... Well, that looks a bit pants. That looks better. If you're getting frustrated with how your videos look, then implementing some of the tips that I'm going to share in this video can have a huge impact. How do I know this? Because I've spent years messing around with loads of different lights, experimenting, wasting a load of time and money to find the perfect setup that works for me. I want to share these tips with you so you don't have to go through the same struggle that I did. Tip number one, and it's probably the simplest tip in this list, but it's also the easiest thing to overlook. Make sure your camera settings are correct. And by this, I mean the white balance. Make sure the white balance on your camera matches your key light. I'm going to demonstrate this by going back to the original setup when I walked through the door whistling. The camera that I was filming on had its white balance set to incandescent, even though I was using a daylight temperature light to light myself. I have bumped up my exposure a little bit just so you can actually see me. And whilst we're on the topic, it's really good practice to take your camera out of auto. We don't want auto white balance, we don't want shutter speed to be on auto, ISO, aperture, none of that. We want control over what our camera is seeing. If we leave it in auto and the light does change, then all of the settings in the camera are going to change as well. So now I'm going to set this camera to the right white balance. And as you can see, that's already made a huge difference. The only light that is lighting me at the minute is a really cheap strip light from B&Q. It's rated at a daylight temperature. And that brings me really nicely onto my next tip. Buy yourself a Cob Light. I spent ages being a bit cheap and buying lots of different LED panels thinking that they would do the job just fine and I could save myself a few quid. But honestly, I wish I'd just bought a decent light in the first place. It makes such a big difference. So now what I want to do is turn off the cheap LED strip and turn on my Cob Light. Hopefully you can see what a drastic impact that's had on this shot. And on this shot as well. The Cob Light that I use as my main key light is an SL60W with a big Godox softbox on it. I'll put the link to both in the video description. The SL60W is quite an old light now. You can pick them up for about 80 to 100 pounds on eBay, and it makes such a huge difference having a light that's almost replicating a window in your house. On that subject as well, I'd recommend trying to block out any natural light. I'm in a garden shed at the minute. I mean, it's quite an elaborate garden shed, but it is a garden shed. And I've closed all the blinds on all of the windows so that I have complete control over the light that's in here. Natural light can be a great way to light a video, but in my experience, when you're using natural light, it tends to change all the time. You have a cloud come over the sun, then it goes back away, then it comes back again, and it means your exposure is constantly changing. You want to try and block out as much light as you can, but replicate that light in a controlled manner with a Cob Light and a nice big softbox. The bigger the softbox, the more diffused your light is going to be, and the better it's going to look. Obviously, only buy a softbox that fits the space. You don't want to buy a meter wide softbox if you're filming in a cupboard. Bigger the better, but obviously don't go crazy. This softbox is about 60 centimeters across, and it just about fits in this space. I'm just going to touch on positioning. There's loads of other videos out there on YouTube that can help you with positioning your lights, but I have mine about 3 foot higher than my head, pointing down at myself at a 45-degree angle, and I have it offset just to the left of me. This helps me get a super popular look where I'm lit very evenly on the left-hand side of my face, your right, and I've got shadow on the right-hand side of my face, your left. Now I think you could get away with this setup just fine. One big softbox off to one side of you, but what I like to do is add a hair or rim light. Alexa, turn on rim light. Just like this. It helps to separate me from my background. It helps me from getting lost in the darkness behind me. So this is with, without, with, without, with. And hopefully you can appreciate the massive difference that it has. It just helps me stand out that little bit more. For my hair light, I use just a very, very cheap Redhead that I bought on Amazon. Again, I'll put a link in the video description. Ideally, you want something where you can direct that light. We have a little bit of spill on the desk, but not a massive amount. If you were using another Cob Light, then you'd want something like a Fresnel lens on the front of it so you can really point that light in the direction that you need it. You don't want it to spill all over the space, like this. I've now opened up the barn doors on the Redhead and I've turned the power up a little bit just to demonstrate what I'm saying. When I've got that focus light, it really just pops me out of the background, which is what I'm after. If you open up those barn doors and spread that light all over the space, then you're going to lose that popping effect. Now let's move on to our practical lights. Now practical lights are just lights that are placed around our scene that add to the overall look of what we're filming, but they don't affect our talent, me. Practical lights are just there to make our scene look better. So I have a Philips Hue light bar down the end of the desk which shines light up this desk. That's why I wasn't worried about the spill I was getting from my rim light. And the light bulbs above the frames are just cheap Alexa controlled lights. So I can change them to be whatever color I want. So if I wanted, I could have this look or this look, but I prefer this. Practical lights are all about just having a bit of fun with your scene. Place lights in different places and see what kind of effects you can create. The biggest tip in this video is that you should probably subscribe to this YouTube channel. Go on, press the button so you don't miss any more content like this in the future. And if you want to see another one of my videos, this video takes a look at the differences in the look you get between a big softbox and a small one.